The last day of October always carried a strange weight in our village. Halloween wasn't just about costumes and candy. Here it was a ritual, a night where every street seemed alive with flickering pumpkins, children's laughter, and the sharp smell of cold autumn air. Families came together, porches glowed with lanterns, and every doorstep seemed to open warmly for the little ones who came knocking. But that year, as I walked alone toward my son's house, my steps felt heavier with each crackle of leaves beneath. My boots clutched a cloth bag close to me, the warmth of the freshly baked cookies seeping faintly through the fabric. They were pumpkin-spiced, cut into little shapes with care ghosts, cats, and bats, just as I used to make when Daniel was a boy. I imagined my grandchildren's eyes lighting up when they saw them, their small voices shouting "Grandma," the way children should on a holiday filled with joy. I told myself, over and over, that it would be fine, that even though I hadn't been invited, surely no one would turn away a mother, especially not on Halloween. But as I turned the corner, the glow from Daniel's house nearly stopped me in my tracks. The windows blazed with warm light. I could see silhouettes, moving children in costumes, darting about inside, the orange flicker of pumpkin lanterns casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. The laughter, high and unrestrained, drifted into the night air, and for a moment I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. That was the sound I had always dreamed of my son's children, my grandchildren, living the kind of life I had struggled so hard to give Daniel. For a fleeting second, I thought of turning back. Maybe I could just leave the cookies on the doorstep with a note. Maybe it was enough, just to know they were happy inside. But then a deeper ache pressed at my chest. The thought of spending another holiday evening in silence, my tiny apartment dark except for the television. No, I wanted to see them, just for a little while. I climbed the short stone steps and stood at the door. My heart raced as I pressed the bell. From inside, I heard a burst of laughter, then footsteps. The door creaked open, and there he was, my son, Daniel, my boy. But the way he looked at me, God, I wish I could erase it from my memory. His face tightened instantly, as if my presence were an unwelcome ghost on his doorstep. "Mom," he said flatly, no warmth, no surprise, just irritation. I lifted the bag quickly, trying to fill the silence. I baked some cookies. For the children, I thought I might stop by just for a moment. It's Halloween, after all. He didn't reach for the bag. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, his jaw clenched, and his eyes darted briefly behind him, toward the living room where I could hear the children squealing with joy. "You shouldn't have come," he said, at last, his voice low but firm. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Daniel, I just wanted, you're not welcome here, Mom." The words were sharper than the autumn wind, cutting deeper than I thought possible. I blinked, forcing myself not to let the tears spill. From the corner of my eye, I saw Claire, his wife, hovering just beyond the hallway. Her lips were pressed into that tight, disapproving line, her arms folded across her chest. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. I'd seen that expression countless times. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, as though embarrassed but unwilling to relent. "Look, if you really have nowhere else to be, maybe you can sit with Mrs. Whitmore next door. She won't mind. The kids are busy right now, and Claire's got everything handled." It took me a moment to process what he was suggesting. He wanted me, his mother, to spend Halloween not with my family, but at the neighbor's house. A kind neighbor, yes, but still a stranger compared to the family I had sacrificed my whole life for. I stood frozen on the doorstep. Memories flooded me, years of working double shifts, sewing costumes by hand for Daniel when money was tight, saving every penny to make sure he never felt different from the other children, nights when I had gone without so he could eat. And now, he couldn't even let me sit with my grandchildren for a holiday. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask. I didn't want Claire to see me break. "Of course," I whispered, "if that's what you want." Daniel nodded quickly, as though relieved, and without another word, he pulled the door closed. The bag of cookies trembled in my hands. I turned and walked back down the steps, each one heavier than the last. The night that had seemed filled with light and laughter now felt unbearably cold. Across the garden wall, Mrs. Whitmore's house glowed faintly with a single lamp in the window. As I made my way toward it, my heart pounded with a mixture of shame, sorrow, and a growing question that refused to leave me. How had I become a guest in my own son's life? And little did I know, Stepping into Mrs. Whitmore's house that night would uncover truths buried far deeper than I could have imagined. That would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Mrs. Whitmore lived just next door, in the kind of stone cottage that carried the scent of old books and lavender, even from the doorstep. She was widowed, much like me, and though we exchanged polite words now and then, we had never spent a holiday together. That night, though, her door opened before I even knocked. "Oh, good heavens," she exclaimed softly, her voice carrying that quiver of surprise. "Is that you, Margaret, out in the cold? Come in at once." Her house was smaller than Daniel's, but as I stepped inside, it wrapped around me like a blanket. A single lamp glowed on the side table, casting warm light across shelves cluttered with framed photographs, porcelain figurines, and dried flowers. The faint crackle of an old radio hummed in the background, playing some classical piece I didn't recognize. Stood in her hallway awkwardly, clutching the bag of cookies. I must have looked ridiculous, like some lost wanderer turned away from home. I didn't mean to intrude," I murmured. "Nonsense," she said, shutting the door firmly behind me. "No one should be out there tonight, all alone. Sit." She ushered me into her living room, where an armchair by the fire waited, as if it had been expecting me. The warmth was almost overwhelming after the sting of the October air. I sank into it, staring at the flames, licking the logs. Mrs. Whitmore studied me with gentle eyes, but she didn't ask questions right away. Instead, she busied herself with the teapot on the small table by the wall. Steam soon filled the room with the calming scent of chamomile. Finally, she turned, handing me a cup. "You've been crying." Her words, though soft, hit me like a mirror I didn't want to look into. I shook my head, but my trembling hands betrayed me. "It's nothing," I whispered. But of course, it wasn't nothing. Nothing didn't leave you shivering inside someone else's house while your family laughed next. Mrs. Whitmore settled into the chair opposite me, her own cup steaming between her palms. She didn't press further, and in some ways, that made it worse. The silence was kind, patient, and it left me alone with my thoughts. Through the thin walls, faint sounds of celebration drifted from Daniel's house, children shouting in delight, doors opening and closing as trick-or-treaters came and went. Every laugh was another reminder that I wasn't part of it. I gripped the cup tightly, the porcelain warm against my palms. How did it come to this? I had spent so many years imagining holidays filled with family, imagining myself surrounded by grandchildren eager for my stories, for my hugs, for the little traditions I had carried forward. Instead, I was a shadow, sitting in a neighbor's chair, while strangers enjoyed what should have been mine. And then, just as I felt the tears threatening again, a sound caught my attention. Voices low, muffled but clear enough through the quiet night air. Daniel's voice, Claire's voice. I froze, setting the cup down on the table beside me. Mrs. Whitmore tilted her head slightly, as if she'd heard it too, but she said nothing. "I told you she'd come," Claire's voice said, sharp even through the wall. Daniel replied, quieter, though I strained to catch his words. "She means well. She always means well, Daniel," Claire snapped. "That's the problem. She pushes her way in, pretends she belongs, but this is our family, not hers." My throat tightened. The words slipped through the walls like knives. Not hers. I leaned closer, heart pounding in my ears. Daniel spoke again, softer this time, almost pleading. "She's my mother." Claire's laugh was short, cold. "And she's my problem when she's here. You promised me, Daniel. You said she wouldn't interfere anymore." There was silence for a long moment. Silence so heavy I thought my heart might stop. And then Daniel's voice, weary, defeated. "I know." I sat back, the world spinning around me. The fire seemed to blur in front of my eyes, so it wasn't just an offhand rejection at the door. Claire didn't merely dislike me, she wanted me erased from their lives. And worse, Daniel was letting it happen. I thought of the way he hadn't even looked at the cookies, the way he'd shut the door so quickly, as though eager to make me disappear. Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time they burned hotter, fueled by something sharper than sadness, something dangerously close to anger. Mrs. Whitmore must have sensed it, because she spoke then, her voice steady and almost knowing. "You heard, didn't you?" I turned to her, startled. Her gaze was calm but firm, her teacup resting in her lap. "Their words. The walls are thin. I hear things I shouldn't sometimes." I swallowed hard, ashamed of the raw pain in my voice. "She hates me." Mrs. Whitmore leaned forward slightly. Then the question you must ask yourself is why. The fire crackled, filling the silence. I wanted to answer, to explain, but I couldn't. I didn't know. Why did Claire despise me so deeply? What had I done, other than love my son? Other than try to be a part of his life? And then Mrs. Whitmore said something that made the air grow colder. Despite the fire, Margaret, there are things about families we don't always see. Sometimes, the truth is buried where we least expect it. And sometimes, she paused, her eyes flickering toward the window, where Daniel's house glowed brightly in the night. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones who keep the deepest secrets. I shivered. Secrets. Before I could ask her what she meant, a loud knock rattled Mrs. Whitmore's front door. Both of us turned sharply. Through the glass panel, I saw the silhouette of a small figure, a child, standing very still under the porch light. Mrs. Whitmore set her cup down carefully. Strange, she murmured. It's late for trick-or-treaters. But when she opened the door, I realized it wasn't a trick-or-treater at all. It was my granddaughter, and the look on her face told me that something was terribly wrong. When Mrs. Whitmore opened the door, the night air rushed in again, chilling the room. My granddaughter stood there, no costume, no candy bag, just her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. Emily, my voice cracked before I could stop it. She looked up at me, eyes wide and shimmering with tears she was clearly trying to hide. Grandma, Mrs. Whitmore moved aside gently. Come in, darling, quickly, before you freeze. Emily slipped in, glancing over her shoulder toward her house. The porch light still shone bright across the lawn, illuminating Daniel's doorway where laughter spilled out every time it opened. But Emily's face was solemn, pale to serious for an 11-year-old on Halloween night. She clutched the sleeve of my coat as I bent down, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't stay long. My heart squeezed. What's wrong, sweetheart? Emily hesitated, then darted a nervous glance at Mrs. Whitmore. My neighbor, wise as ever, gave her a reassuring smile. Don't worry, dear. You can speak freely here. But Emily still hesitated, biting her lip. Finally, she leaned closer, her little voice trembling. Mommy said I shouldn't talk to you. The words landed heavily, but I forced my face to remain calm. She said that. Emily nodded. She said you ruin everything. She said you tell lies and try to make Daddy feel bad. And that if I talk to you, I'll get in trouble. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lies. What lies had Claire filled her head with? Before I could respond, Emily tugged harder at my sleeve, her urgency breaking through her fear. But Grandma, I wanted to see you, because I heard something, tonight, something bad. Her eyes filled with tears, and I saw how her small body trembled not from the cold, but from the weight of what she was carrying. I took her hands gently in mine. Tell me. She glanced again at the window, where the glow of her home pulsed, like a beacon of secrets. Her voice dropped even lower. I heard Mommy and Daddy fighting. They were in the kitchen. I was supposed to be upstairs, but I came down because I wanted more candy. She swallowed hard. And I heard Mommy say that you'll never come back, that she'll make sure you disappear from Daddy's life forever. The words hit me like a physical blow. Disappear. Forever. Emily squeezed my hand tighter. Daddy didn't yell at her. He just stayed quiet, like he agreed. I sat frozen, my breath shallow. Mrs. Whitmore's gaze flickered between us, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked like she wanted to speak, but she let Emily continue. Then Mommy said that she knows everything, that she knows what you did before. I blinked, my chest tightened painfully. What I did before? Emily nodded earnestly, tears slipping down her cheeks now. She said you have secrets, bad ones, and that one day, everyone will know. Her voice cracked on the last word, and then she fell silent, staring up at me with terrified eyes, as though begging me to tell her it wasn't true. But I couldn't speak, because the truth was, I did have a past, one I had tried to bury. And if Claire knew, if Claire had discovered, my hands shook violently as I pulled Emily into a hug, more to steady myself than her. Her small body trembled against mine, and I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the faint smell of chocolate and pumpkin from her hair. It's all right, sweetheart, I whispered, though my voice was far from steady. It's all right. But it wasn't all right, not at all. For the first time, I realized Claire's hatred of me wasn't just dislike. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even selfishness. It was calculated, intentional. She knew something, and she was using it against me. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat gently. her voice steady as she addressed Emily. "Darling, you mustn't stay too long. Your parents will notice." Emily pulled back reluctantly, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. "I don't want to go back." My heart broke at her words. But I knew she had to. If Claire found out she had been here, the consequences would be worse for her than for me. I forced a smile, though my throat felt like it was closing. "Listen to me, Emily. You're so brave, coming here tonight. But you have to go back now. Act as though nothing happened. Can you do that?" Her lip quivered, but she nodded. I cupped her face, staring into her innocent eyes, trying to absorb every ounce of her courage. "No matter what anyone says, you must remember this. I love you with all my heart. And nothing will ever change that." She threw her arms around me one last time, clinging tight, before finally letting go. Mrs. Whitmore led her gently to the door. "Off you go, dear. And remember, you can always find us here if you need to." Emily gave a small nod and slipped back out into the night, her little figure darting quickly across the lawn, back to the glowing house that no longer felt like mine. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence filled the room again, heavy and suffocating. I sank back into the chair, my hands pressed to my face. Claire knew. She knew something about my past, something I had buried long ago. And now she was using it to poison Daniel against me, to keep Emily away, to destroy every thread that still tied me to my family. But how could she possibly know? And worse, what else was she planning? Mrs. Whitmore's voice broke through my spiral, calm, measured, but with a strange weight behind it. "Margaret," she said quietly, "it seems your past has found its way to the present. And if you want to save what remains of your family, you'll have to face it." I lifted my gaze to her, shaken. "You don't understand. If the truth comes out, I'll lose everything." Her expression didn't change. "If you do nothing, you'll lose it anyway." The fire crackled, sending sparks upward like fleeting stars. For the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath me shift. The life I thought I had so carefully built was crumbling, and Claire was holding the hammer. The only question was, how much longer until she swung it again? That night, long after Emily slipped back into her house and Mrs. Whitmore went upstairs, I remained in the quiet living room, staring into the flickering fire. The flames shifted and hissed, licking at the logs, but my mind wasn't on the warmth they provided. My thoughts were tumbling, dragging me down paths I had avoided for decades. Claire knew something. She had threatened me without even speaking, directly through my son, through my granddaughter, through the cruel words she whispered in their ears. But what exactly did she know? I hadn't spoken of my past in years. Daniel had only been a child when it all happened. Emily wasn't even born, and I had gone to great lengths to bury it, moving across towns, changing jobs, even altering the way I introduced myself in new places. So how had Claire found out? I pressed my palms to my temples, trying to block out the sound of Emily's frightened voice replaying in my head. She said, "You have secrets, bad ones, and that one day everyone will know." Secrets, bad ones. The words felt like daggers. I stood abruptly, pacing the length of the small sitting room. My old boots thudded softly against the wooden floorboards. I could feel my pulse hammering, not just from fear but from the old shame I thought I had buried. 4 good memories I had tried to smother stirred inside me. It was nearly 40 years ago. I was young then, fiery and reckless. My husband, God rest his soul, was alive, though our marriage had already begun to fray around the edges. Money was scarce. Tempers ran high. And I had made a choice, one desperate, foolish choice that had changed everything. It had to do with the factory, with the accident, with the man whose family never forgave me. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the memory back down, shoving it into the dark corner of my mind where it belonged. Not now, not yet, but Claire's voice seemed to echo inside my head, even though she wasn't here. "One day, everyone will know." The clock on Mrs. Whitmore's mantelpiece chimed midnight. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and lowered myself into the armchair again, feeling suddenly very old and very tired. My heart longed for sleep, but my mind was restless. I needed to know how Claire had discovered anything. And there was only one person who might help me start unraveling this: Daniel. But Daniel wouldn't listen. Not anymore. He had already closed the door on me, literally and figuratively. Every word I said would only bounce back like an echo in an empty hall. I had to be careful. The next morning, I rose before dawn. The streets of the little German town were quiet. still wrapped in a pale fog that curled through the cobblestones. Church bells rang faintly in the distance, muffled by the mist. Mrs. Whitmore insisted on making me tea before I left. She watched me with her sharp, perceptive eyes as I pulled on my coat. "You're going back, aren't you?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I need answers." She gave a slow sigh, pouring the tea into a delicate porcelain cup. "Margaret, sometimes digging into the past only makes the wound bleed again." I met her gaze steadily. "And sometimes it's the only way to stop someone else from bleeding you dry." Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile, stubborn as ever. I took the tea, sipped it quickly, then set the cup aside. "Wish me luck." She didn't. Instead, she touched my arm gently. "Be careful." By mid-morning, I found myself standing once again in front of Daniel's house. The festive decorations from Halloween still clung to the porch paper bats. A faded plastic pumpkin, but the air already smelled faintly of early winter. I stood there for several minutes, debating whether to knock. My chest ached with hesitation. I could picture Claire's face, the clearly tight smile, sharp eyes, cold words. But before I could make a decision, the door opened. It was Daniel. He froze when he saw me, his hand still on the knob. He wasn't dressed for work yet. His hair was tousled, and there was a weariness in his eyes. "Mom," he said flatly, "why are you here?" The words were not welcoming, but they weren't cruel either. Just tired. I swallowed hard. "I wanted to talk." He glanced behind him, toward the kitchen, then stepped out onto the porch, closing the door halfway so Claire wouldn't hear. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "Claire doesn't want." I cut him off, my voice trembling. "Daniel, please. I just need to understand. What has she told you?" His jaw tightened. He looked down at the ground, his foot scuffing the wooden step. "It doesn't matter," he said. "The point is, I don't know if I can trust you anymore." My heart clenched. "Trust me, Daniel. I raised you. I worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table after your father passed. Every sacrifice I made was for you. How could you think because—" He interrupted sharply, then lowered his voice, "because Claire showed me things, old things, records, letters, things I didn't even know existed." My blood ran cold. "Records," I whispered. He hesitated, then shook his head. "I can't look. I can't get into this right now. Just stop coming around for it while, okay? It's only making things worse." With that, he slipped back inside and closed the door. But his words echoed in my mind, like a bell. Records, letters. Claire had evidence. Somehow, she had dug into my past, into the life I had tried so hard to leave behind. And she wasn't just whispering accusations, she was showing Daniel proof. I stood there on the porch, numb, as the door shut me out again. This time, though, I didn't walk away in defeat, because now I knew what I had to do. I had to find out exactly what Claire had discovered, and I had to face the past I had been running from for nearly 4 decades, no matter what it cost me. I walked back through the town in a haze, the cobblestones uneven under my steps, the autumn air biting at my face. Daniel's words kept echoing in my head. Records, letters. It was as though a door I had bolted shut decades ago had suddenly been kicked wide open. I couldn't just stand there and wait for Claire to use those pieces of my past against me. I needed to see them with my own eyes, needed to know what exactly she had unearthed. But where would she have found them? Most of those documents should have been buried in archives, lost under years of dust and bureaucracy. Unless someone had helped her. And I had one guess who. I made my way across town, past narrow alleyways and leaning brick buildings, until I reached the library. It was small, tucked between a bakery and an old church, but inside it carried the weight of decades. The smell hit me as soon as I pushed open the heavy wooden door, that dry, slightly sweet scent of paper and history. Behind the counter sat Marta, the town's archivist. She was in her 70s now, thin as a reed, with sharp eyes that always seemed to notice more than you wanted her to. She looked up as I entered, surprise flickering across her face. "Margaret, well, isn't this something? Haven't seen you in here for years." I forced a smile. "Yes, it's been a while." She tilted her head. "And what brings you back to old paper and dust?" I hesitated. Should I ask directly? No, that would only make her suspicious. Instead, I leaned on the counter, pretending to scan the shelves. "I was just thinking about the past," I said carefully. "About the old days. I wondered if you still keep records from the factory. You know, the one on the east side, back when it was still running." Marta's brows rose. That's a dark chapter. Haven't heard anyone ask about it in years. My throat tightened. Yes, dark indeed. She studied me for a moment, her gaze too sharp to knowing. Then she sighed and stood, moving toward a locked cabinet. Of course, we still have them. Employment records, incident reports, old correspondence. The council insisted on keeping everything, though heaven knows why. She pulled out a key and opened the cabinet with deliberate slowness. My stomach churned as she retrieved a stack of folders bound with string. When she set them on the counter, my hands trembled. The weight of the past was suddenly right there, inches from my fingers. I sifted through the papers quickly, my eyes scanning names, dates, signatures, and then I froze. There it was, my name, written in black ink on a report from nearly 4 decades ago. Next to it, the words, negligence, suspected. The accident, the one that had haunted me all these years, the one that had taken a man's life. I felt my chest tighten, as if the air had thickened around me. I could still remember that day, the smell of smoke, the shouts, the way the world seemed to collapse in one terrible moment. It hadn't been my fault, not entirely, but the blame had fallen on me, and the whispers had followed me for years after, and here it was, preserved neatly on paper, waiting for someone like Claire to find it. I shoved the report back into the stack, trying to steady my breathing. Marta, I said slowly, has anyone looked through these recently? Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she composed herself. We don't get many requests, but, yes, someone came by. A woman, about 6 months ago. My blood ran cold. Did she give her name? Marta pursed her lips. Claire. I remember because she was polite, but insistent. She wanted copies of everything related to the accident. I told her some of it was sensitive, but she had a letter from the council allowing access. My stomach dropped. Claire had been planning this for months. And did you give them to her? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marta hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I had no choice. The letter was legitimate. I gripped the counter until my knuckles whitened. I wanted to scream, to curse, to tear those papers apart, but I forced myself to breathe. Thank you, I said quietly, though the words burned in my throat as I walked out of the library. The stack of memories burned into my mind. I realized something with chilling clarity. Claire wasn't just whispering lies. She had evidence, documents, reports that painted me as a negligent worker, a careless woman who had caused a man's death. She was going to use them to poison my son and granddaughter against me completely. But why? Why would she go to such lengths? This wasn't just about dislike. This was war. The fog had lifted outside, but the air felt heavier than ever. I walked aimlessly for a while, trying to steady the storm inside me. And then it struck. If Claire had gone through the archives, she might have found more than just reports. There were letters too. Letters I had written in the aftermath, desperate, pleading letters to the family of the man who had died. If she had those, then she had my shame in my own words. My hands shook as I realized the danger. I needed to find out what exactly she had taken. But there was only one way to do that. I would have to confront her, not at Daniel's house, not in front of Emily, but somewhere she couldn't pretend, couldn't hide behind smiles. And I knew exactly when I'd have the chance, because in just a few days, the town would hold its autumn festival, and Claire never missed an opportunity to show her face there. That night, as I lay in the guest bed at Mrs. Whitmore's, I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. The past was no longer just a shadow. It was alive, breathing, walking beside me again, and Claire had it in her hands. But she didn't know one thing. I was ready to fight back. The town square was alive with the hum of voices, the glow of lanterns strung between buildings, and the sweet scent of roasted chestnuts wafting through the crisp October air. Children darted between stalls, their laughter piercing through the music of a small folk band playing near the fountain. Couples strolled hand in hand, pausing to taste mulled wine or admire carved pumpkins that lined the cobblestones. To anyone else, it was a perfect autumn evening, but to me, it felt like stepping onto a stage I had not rehearsed for. My heart hammered as I moved through the crowd, past familiar faces that offered polite nods. My scarf was wrapped tightly around my neck, not just for warmth, but as if I could shield myself from what was coming. And then, there she was, Claire, standing near the pastry stall, a cup of steaming cider in her hand, laughing lightly at something Daniel had just said. Emily twirled beside them, her scarf trailing behind her like a ribbon. her joy so pure it twisted the knife deeper in me. For a moment, I almost turned back. My chest ached with the memory of the library, with the weight of the old accident records. What if she spoke of them here? What if she exposed me in front of everyone? But then Claire looked up, and our eyes met. She smiled, that same smile polite to anyone watching, but with a gleam that told me she knew exactly what she was doing. I forced my legs to carry me forward. "Daniel," I said softly when I reached them. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. "Mother, you're here." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to miss the festival. Emily bounded up to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Grandma, look at the lantern I made." She held up a paper lantern decorated with stars. My throat tightened as I stroked her hair. "It's beautiful, darling." But then Claire's voice slid between us like a blade. "Margaret, how lovely to see you out tonight. I wasn't sure you'd come. Crowds can be overwhelming, especially when old ghosts linger." Her words were smooth, but I heard the edge beneath them. Daniel frowned slightly, as if he sensed the tension, but he didn't say anything. "Ghosts?" I asked quietly, forcing her to clarify. She sipped her cider, her eyes never leaving mine. "Yes, the past has a way of following us, doesn't it? Some people spend years pretending it isn't there, but the truth always finds a way out, don't you think?" My hands tightened on Emily's shoulders. I could feel my pulse thundering in my ears. "Claire," I said, lowering my voice, "this isn't the time." "Oh, but when is the time?" she countered smoothly. "Secrets left too long in the dark tend to rot, and I think Daniel deserves better than shadows, don't you?" Daniel shifted, glancing between us. "What's going on?" The moment I had dreaded was unfolding faster than I could control. The music, the laughter, the glow of lanterns, all of it blurred into a haze around me. "Nothing," I said quickly. "This isn't the place." But Claire pressed on. "Then where is the place, Margaret? Because I've been patient. I've given you chances. But Emily deserves to grow up in a family without lies." Emily tilted her head, confused, sensing the sharpness in her mother's tone. My stomach churned. She was going to do it. Right here, in front of everyone. I took a step closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "Claire, please, not tonight." For a moment, I saw the satisfaction in her eyes, the thrill of holding power. But then she tilted her head, pretending innocence. "Of course, tonight is about joy, isn't it?" She placed a hand on Daniel's arm and smiled sweetly at him. "We'll talk later." The evening continued, but I couldn't shake the dread coiled in my chest. I tried to smile at Emily's lantern parade, tried to admire the fireworks that painted the sky in bursts of gold and red. But inside I was unraveling. Every glance Claire threw me was a reminder. I hold your past, and I will use it by the time the festival ended and the crowd began to scatter. My resolve hardened. I could no longer wait for her to strike. I had to confront her directly. So when Daniel led Emily home, and the streets began to empty, I lingered. I waited until Claire stepped away from the family, excusing herself with some pretense. She walked toward the quieter side street near the old chapel, the glow of lanterns fading into shadow. I followed. The air was colder there, the sounds of the festival muffled. "Claire," I called softly. She turned, surprised but not startled. That smile returned. I wondered how long it would take. My breath clouded in the air as I stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" Her eyes gleamed in the dim light. "The truth, out in the open. No more pretending." "You've already gone through the archives," I said bitterly. "You've taken reports, letters, things that were never meant for your eyes. Why? What satisfaction does it give you to dig up my pain?" Claire crossed her arms, her voice sharp now, no longer hidden beneath sweetness. "Because I will not let Emily grow up idolizing a woman who hides behind lies. Do you know what it does to a child, to find out later that the person they trusted most has deceived them? Better she knows now, before she's old enough to see you as flawless." Her words cut deep, not just because of their cruelty, but because part of me understood the fear she described. I had lived with it myself growing up, discovering truths about my own parents I had never been prepared for. But still, the venom in her tone was undeniable. "You don't want to protect Emily," I whispered. "You want to destroy me." Claire's silence was answer enough. And then, with a quiet, chilling calm, she said, "If you won't tell them, Margaret, I will, very soon. And when I do, Daniel will finally see who you really are." I stood frozen as she walked away, her heels clicking against the stones. The lantern light flickered briefly on her face before she disappeared back into the festival crowd. The night air pressed down on me, heavy and merciless. The clock was ticking. Claire had made her move clear, and I had only one choice left: to tell Daniel myself before she twisted the truth beyond repair. The house was quiet that night, but my mind was anything but. I sat in the small armchair by my bedroom window, the one upholstered in fading blue fabric Daniel had helped me carry from the antique market years ago. Outside, the streets were empty. After the festival, lanterns swaying gently in the night breeze, their lights slowly burning out. But inside, my chest was alive with fire. Claire's words replayed over and over, louder each time. "If you won't tell them, Margaret, I will." I pressed my palms against my knees, trying to steady myself. How many years had I lived with the shadows of the past tucked neatly away, convinced that silence was a form of love? How many times had I told myself Daniel was safer not knowing? But Claire was right about one thing: secrets never stay buried forever, and if they're dragged into the light by someone else's hands, they come out twisted, poisoned, made into something darker than they ever were. I knew I had no choice. I had to speak. The memory rose again, unbidden, like it always did when I tried to sleep. It was a night much like this, cold, the kind of damp chill that seeped into your bones. I was younger, still living in the village near the river. My husband, Robert, had been alive then, his laughter still filling the corners of our modest home. But that night, he hadn't been there. It was only me and the mistake that changed everything. I could still hear the screech of tires, the terrible crack of metal against stone, the sickening silence afterward, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The face of the boy no older than 6, in shock before the world stole his breath away. I had told no one the truth of what happened, not the full truth. The reports buried it beneath technical words: accidental, misjudged turn, unfamiliar road. And I let the world believe what it wanted. But inside, the guilt lived with me like a second skin. And now, Claire had found the papers. She had pieced it together, and soon, Daniel would know. The clock ticked past midnight, each sound drilling into me. I whispered into the silence, as if Robert could still hear me. "What do I do?" Of course, no answer came, only the echo of my own guilt. The next morning, I forced myself to move through routine. I brewed tea, buttered toast I couldn't eat, and folded laundry with trembling hands. Daniel had promised to stop by before work to check on the boiler, which had been acting up again. It would be then I would tell him. But when he arrived, cheerful in his dark wool coat, Emily skipping in behind him with a book she wanted to show me, the words froze in my throat. "Morning, Mum," he said warmly, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "Boiler making noise again." I nodded mutely, leading him to the utility room. My hands fidgeted with the hem of my cardigan as I watched him crouch to inspect the machine. This was the son I had raised, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose tears I had wiped away, whose dreams I had encouraged. To look at him, now a grown man, kind, steady, a devoted father, it felt unbearable to think of him looking at me with disgust. "Emily, love, why don't you show Grandma your drawing while I fix this?" Daniel called over his shoulder. Emily bounced into the room with her book of sketches, thrusting it into my hands. "Look, Grandma, I drew you and me in the garden with the roses." I smiled weakly, stroking her hair. "It's beautiful, darling." Her innocent joy was the final thread keeping me from speaking. How could I bring the weight of my past crashing down on this family, on this child who saw me as nothing but good? So I stayed silent. Again. After they left, the silence of the house felt heavier than ever. My cowardice pressed against me like chains. And then, later that afternoon, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the voice on the other end froze me where I stood. "Margaret." Claire's tone was cool, clipped. "I think we both know you wasted your chance." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Please, Claire, give me time. Let me explain it to him my way." Her laugh was short, humorless. "Time? You've had decades. You chose silence. Now I'll choose the truth. Tomorrow night, dinner, you'll come, and you'll sit there while I tell Daniel everything. He deserves to hear it." Claire, but the line went dead. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Tomorrow. She was going to do it tomorrow. I thought of Emily's drawings, of Daniel's steady warmth, of Robert's absence that still ached in the quiet corners of my heart. And then, slowly, Painfully, I made my decision. If anyone was going to tell my son the truth, it had to be me, not Claire. Tomorrow, at that dinner table, I would open my mouth and finally let the words spill out, even if it destroyed me. The night air was crisp as I approached Daniel's house. The glow from the windows promised warmth and family, but inside, tension clung like a thick fog. I carried with me the weight of decades, the accident, the guilt, the secrets, and tonight, the truth would finally meet the people it had haunted for years. Claire was already there when I arrived. She was radiant in a way that made her appear untouchable, the very image of composure. Her smile was poised, but I could sense the anticipation beneath it, the thrill of control she always craved. Daniel opened the door. His face was unreadable concern and conflict warring across his features. Emily peeked out from behind him, curiosity and excitement in her eyes, unaware of the storm about to unfold. I stepped inside, feeling the familiar, suffocating smell of roasted turkey and spiced cider. The dining room was lavishly decorated for Halloween, with orange and black accents, but my gaze was fixed on the people seated around the table. Claire's eyes met mine briefly, and I saw the subtle smirk she tried to hide. She thinks she owns the narrative tonight. Dinner began with polite conversation. Emily chattering about her school projects and the crafts she had made. I smiled, trying to anchor myself in normalcy, but my hands shook beneath the table. Finally, Claire leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You've been very quiet tonight, Margaret," she said, her tone syrupy but edged with steel. "I assume you're enjoying the family gathering." I took a deep breath, letting the silence hang before responding. "Yes, very much." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That's interesting, considering what I planned to share." My chest tightened. I had expected her to do this, but hearing it aloud was worse than imagining it. Daniel looked between us, confusion flickering in his gaze. "Claire," I held up my hand. "No, let me speak first." Everyone froze. The room seemed to shrink as my voice, steady despite the storm inside me, filled the space. "Daniel, Emily, there's something I've never told you. Something I buried because I was afraid, because I thought it would hurt you. But it's time you heard it from me, before anyone else twists it into something cruel." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I ignored her, letting my voice rise. "Years ago, when I was much younger, there was an accident, a terrible accident that changed lives." My hands trembled, and I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. I was involved. A boy lost his life that night. I did not intend for it to happen, and I did everything I could afterward to make amends, to live with the consequences quietly. But I never told anyone. I thought it was safer that way. Safer for everyone. Emily's small hand found mine. Under the table, she squeezed it, eyes wide. Daniel's face turned pale, disbelief mingling with horror. "Mom, I had no idea." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I thought it would be easier to protect you from the truth, but someone else found the records, the letters, and they may have told you a distorted version of what happened. I cannot let that happen. I will not let my silence harm you any longer." Claire's voice broke through, sharp and cutting. "Distorted version. Margaret, you think you can justify this? All these years, pretending nothing happened." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze with something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in decades: defiance. "I am not pretending anymore. I am telling the truth, right here, right now. If you think twisting my past will make me look guilty in front of my son and granddaughter, you're wrong. I am telling them myself." Her composure faltered, just slightly, and Daniel's eyes narrowed, studying both of us. "Mom," he said, softly, still processing, I don't know what to say." Emily's voice, small but certain, rang out. "Grandma, thank you for telling me. I'm glad you did." I reached out to hold her hand, feeling the warmth, the love that had survived even Claire's schemes. Claire, realizing her control slipping, tried one last time. "Daniel, you should hear the rest of the story. There's more files, documents." I cut her off. Calm but firm. "No, Daniel doesn't need to hear it from you. He needs to hear the truth from me, with context, with my voice. What happened was tragic. I take responsibility for my part. But I am not the villain you want me to be." Daniel leaned back, exhaling deeply, his eyes wet with emotion. "Mom, it's a lot, but I see you. I see that you carried this alone, all these years." The room was still, Emily staring between her parents and me, sensing the shift in the air. Claire's face hardened. You think this changes anything? I smiled faintly, with a quiet strength. It changes everything. The truth always does. And now, Emily knows her grandmother is honest. And Daniel, you know I love you. Nothing, not even secrets or lies, can take that away. The tension in the room seemed to dissolve, replaced by something raw, human, relief, pain, forgiveness starting to stretch across the table like a fragile bridge. Claire opened her mouth again, but Daniel's hand rested lightly on mine, stopping her. His eyes were resolute. No, Claire, we will not let this ruin us. The truth has been told. That is enough. I exhaled, the weight of decades lifting slightly from my shoulders. Emily's small hand in mine felt like a tether to hope, a reminder that honesty could survive even the darkest secrets. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The past had been revealed. The truth was finally out, and despite everything, my family was still here. The room was quiet after the dinner. The only sound was Emily softly humming a tune she had learned at school, her small fingers tracing patterns in the tablecloth. I sat back, exhausted, letting the weight of what had been spoken sink into my bones. For decades, I had carried this burden alone, and now, finally, it was lifted, shared openly with the ones I loved most. Daniel sat across from me, still pale but with eyes softened by understanding. Mom, I don't even know what to say. I never imagined. I always trusted you, but hearing the truth, it's overwhelming. I reached across the table, placing a hand on his. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's the truth, and it's the one thing I wanted you to hear from me, not from anyone else. Emily climbed onto my lap, hugging me tightly. Grandma, I love you. I knew you were good. I knew it. Her words were a balm, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to exhale fully. Claire, meanwhile, had retreated to the edge of the room, her composure now noticeably fraying. She pressed her lips together, her hands gripping the chair tightly. There was no triumph in her eyes anymore, only the faintest hint of frustration. Daniel noticed it immediately. Claire, it's over. You don't get to dictate the story anymore. Mom told the truth. That's what matters. Her shoulders stiffened. I just wanted to protect Emily. Daniel shook his head. Protecting her doesn't mean manipulating her or holding power over our family. You need to understand that. Her gaze fell, and for a brief moment, I saw the person beneath the carefully constructed mask, a woman, afraid that control could slip from her hands. But Emily, sensing the tension, tugged at Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, can we go to the garden? The pumpkins are glowing. That simple request broke the spell. Daniel smiled faintly and rose, guiding Claire and Emily toward the back door. Even though Claire's expression remained guarded, there was a subtle shift. She realized she could no longer control the narrative. I sat back, staring at the remnants of the meal on the table: turkey crumbs, spilled cider, the faint scent of rosemary, all ordinary details of a night that had become extraordinary. For hours, I replayed every word I had spoken, every glance I had shared with Daniel and Emily, the raw honesty, the trembling voice, the tears that threatened to fall but never fully did. It had all been worth it. I thought back to the accident, the decades of shame and fear, the countless nights spent wondering if Daniel would ever learn the truth, the nights when Emily had clutched at me in the dark, sensing my sorrow, and I realized something profound. Truth is not just about confession. It is about courage. It is about trust. It is about allowing those we love to see us fully, flaws and all. Hours later, long after Emily had been tucked into bed and Daniel had returned to the living room to clear dishes, I walked to the window and looked out at the town. The streets were empty, quiet under the glow of the moon. Lanterns from the festival still lingered in the distance, casting gentle, warm light across the cobblestones. I felt the past shift. The weight of decades of secrecy and fear had lessened, not vanished entirely. There were still things to confront, conversations to have, memories to reconcile, but the worst of it was behind me. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. The past had been revealed, yes, but revelation did not equal destruction. It equaled freedom. Claire's presence lingered in my mind. I knew she had been beaten, not by deceit, but by honesty. I also knew that she might continue to resent me, might struggle to accept my role in Daniel and Emily's lives, but that was her journey, not mine. I had done what I needed to do, and sometimes that is all a person can do. I took a deep breath and whispered into the quiet room. If you're still here, please don't forget to subscribe Myla Stories. I share stories that come straight from the heart. The words felt both ironic and fitting, a reminder that sharing stories, revealing truth, was never easy, but always necessary. The night wore on, peaceful and heavy with reflection. I knew there would be challenges ahead. Family dynamics are rarely simple, and wounds of the past do not disappear instantly. But I had faced the fear of exposure, the risk of Daniel's disappointment, the weight of decades of secrecy, and I had survived. Sometimes, the hardest part of family isn't love, it's truth. And tonight, truth had finally won. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft golden glow over the living room. I sat in my favorite armchair, wrapped in a shawl that smelled faintly of lavender, and watched Emily play quietly on the rug, her laughter light and unburdened. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a sense of peace. The tension of the previous night had lifted, replaced by a fragile calm. Daniel entered the room, his eyes warm but tinged with exhaustion. He placed a cup of tea on the table beside me. "Mom, I just wanted to say thank you last night for being honest. I know it wasn't easy." I smiled softly. "It was the only way, Daniel. I couldn't let anyone else control the story. Not Claire, not anyone." He nodded, his gaze falling to Emily. "And for Emily to, she deserved to see you, as you are, strong, human." Emily looked up at me with her big brown eyes and hugged me tightly. "Grandma, I love you. Don't ever hide from me." I kissed her forehead. "I never will, darling. Never again." After breakfast, I walked through the town square, now empty and quiet, the remnants of the festival gone. The cool breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. I felt a profound clarity settle over me. The past, with all its mistakes and regrets, had been revealed. And yet, I was not broken. The truth had set us free, not just me, but Daniel and Emily too. I remembered the accident, the letters, the reports. I remembered the fear that had kept me silent for decades, and I remembered the guilt that had gnawed at me every night. Now, I understood something essential. Truth is not just about confession. It is about courage. It is about trust. It is about showing love even when the past has shadows that threaten to overwhelm. Claire's role in this story became clear in my mind. She had sought control, believing that her version of events could dictate the family's emotions. But control built on manipulation is fragile. By speaking my truth, I had reclaimed the narrative. I had chosen honesty over fear, connection over shame, and in doing so, I had created a space for understanding, empathy, and forgiveness. That evening, as Daniel helped Emily with her homework, I sat by the window, reflecting. Life is unpredictable. People change, relationships are tested, and the weight of unspoken truths can crush even the strongest bonds. But there is power in facing the past, there is strength in admitting mistakes, and there is freedom in choosing love over resentment, honesty over secrecy. I thought about my own mother, long gone, and how she had taught me that family is not just about blood, but about trust, protection, and truth. I felt her presence in the quiet room, her wisdom guiding me, even now. Later, I wrote in my journal, recounting every moment of the past week, the tension, the fear, the confrontation, and the eventual peace. Writing it down helped me see the full arc of the story, the journey from secrecy to revelation, from shame to understanding. I paused, staring at the ink on the page, and whispered, "If you're still here, please don't forget to subscribe Myla Stories." I share stories that come straight from the heart. The words reminded me that sharing stories, truthful, emotional, human stories, is never just about the past. It is about connecting, healing, and learning from the experiences that shape us. By nightfall, the house was quiet once more. Daniel had put Emily to bed, and I settled in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea. The fire crackled softly, illuminating the room with warm, golden light. I reflected on everything, the fear, the confrontation, the relief. Life is fragile. Relationships are delicate, but the bonds that survive honesty, trust, and courage are stronger than any secret, any deception, any moment of shame. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my heart. The past was no longer a prison. The future was no longer uncertain. And in that quiet, golden glow, I understood the most important lesson of all. Life is not about hiding from mistakes. It is about facing them, learning from them, and choosing love every single day. I placed my hand on Emily's drawing from the festival, now framed on the mantel, and whispered softly, "Tomorrow will be better because we faced the truth today." And that is what family is truly about. The fire crackled, the night settled, and for the first time in decades, I felt free.